Hi there, and thanks for joining us this week on Your Home, Your Vote Campaign 2011. And with less than 2 weeks to go until May 2nd, candidates don't have a second to spare, and voters are starting to pay more attention to the race. But how much attention are people really paying, and is the campaign having an impact on voters? We'll talk to a political scientist who breaks down the poll numbers to show us what we could be getting in terms of minority or majority this time around. We're also taking a close look at the Halton riding, where the 4 main candidates are women. It's the only riding in the country with that distinction, and we'll also introduce you to perhaps the oldest candidate running in this election, and he is quite a character. Now, as for the leaders this week, they're making their way back into battleground Ontario. Jack Layton was campaigning in Welland on Tuesday, where he's hoping to keep his party seat out of Conservative hands, while Michael Ignatieff campaigned in Brampton on Tuesday evening, trying to firm up voter support in a riding the Tories have targeted as one they can steal from the Grits. Stephen Harper, meanwhile, was in Northern Ontario mining for votes and looking to pick up some seats. Meanwhile, independent Conservative MP Helena Georges was getting a lot of attention in the past week after being kicked out of the Conservative caucus by Stephen Harper 1 year ago. On Friday, she released documents which showed none of the allegations made against her were true.
As you all know, for over a year, I've been trying to get to the bottom of this whole sordid affair.
Conference in her riding, Georges told the assembled reporters that she believes Stephen Harper was responsible for a smear campaign against her. The RCMP was able to speed up her access to information request in this case, and they found no way to back up the serious allegations against Georges of fraud, extortion, and prostitution. The allegations were made by a Toronto-based private investigator, but when he was pressed for proof, he came up with nothing. But Georges says trying to get answers to try to clear her name was hard, and again, she blames her former leader for holding up the process.
Even after making the access to information request under the Privacy Act, the government has gone out of its way to restrict access to this basic information. The details of this report are extremely disturbing. It has demonstrated that there was a concerted effort to perpetrate lies and smear my good name. If only Mr. Harper had taken the time to be open about the allegations that were presented to him and had given me a chance to confront them, much hardship could have been avoided. I don't have to tell you all about the nightmare that my family endured over the past year as a result of the treatment from those I served so loyally to for years. The damage is real. Sorry. It is deep, and it is permanent. Imagine waking up every day for months, seeing headlines and stories that have no basis in reality. I am standing up for myself, I am standing up for my constituents, and I am standing up for the democratic principles that we all cherish.
So while Helena Georges is standing up to Stephen Harper, it can't be easy. During her news conference, she also linked to how she was treated to her sex, suggesting a male counterpart may not have been treated the same way. And while her situation may be an extreme example of the difficulties of holding public office, it's likely not encouraging a lot of women to throw their hat into the political ring to run. But that's not the case in Halton, where the candidates from the 4 main parties are all women. So what is it that has these women interested in running for office, and what makes the race different there because of their similarity? Take a look. I believe this is the only riding in Canada which is an all-female candidate base. How does that make you feel?
I'm very proud, because when I started out in politics, there weren't women, and women were expected to be a version of a man. You know, you went into politics, you had to wear the male suit and the male clothes and compete with the male. And it's just great to see how far women have come.
It changes a little bit of the campaign. I was asked this morning how it changes it. I would say that the debates are more civil. We still have heated exchanges, but there's not as many personal attacks. It doesn't seem to be as pit bullish as some other contests have been in the past.
We've had a number of debates. It's it's been really fun. I think it's also fantastic that we're going to have a member of parliament who's a woman. But we have a long way to go in terms of women's equity. There's only 22% of the parliament is represented by women. And this government has scaled back on pay equity. This current government has stopped funding to a number of women's organizations.
How important is it for more women to be involved in politics, and how unique is it about Halton?
Yeah, well, I think women obviously get along in a way that is different than men. We tend, I think I've said this like too many times, but I'll just keep repeating myself. We tend not to be, our egos don't kind of get in the way of communicating. I think that women would be able to find solutions and sort of maybe do away with some of the arguing and the posturing that that you see occasionally.
I mean, the House of Commons, the behavior is generally panned by almost all Canadians.
It's a bit embarrassing.
So are you suggesting that if there were more women in the House, that it would be a more civil place?
Yeah, but there'd have to be a lot more.
It's not easy though to be a female MP, is it? It's not easy to be an MP, period, I guess, but you're a mother.
Yeah.
You have 2 kids. You're in Ottawa a lot of the time. I mean, how much of a challenge is it?
It's all about balance, and sometimes you don't get it right. My kids are 9 and 6, and ironically enough, after this canvass tonight and before a canvass this evening, I actually have to go to my son's basketball tournament because he made the junior team, so that's an important thing. So I put family first in where I can in terms of balancing for major events.
Has it hurt you at all in the last couple of years?
Not one single person has complained at the door.
The challenges that we face aren't to do with women's abilities. The challenges we face are the systems that we work in, the communities that we work in, the parliament. How do we make those systems more conducive to inclusion?
If I could say one thing about having an all-female candidate slate, is that young women in this riding will see that they firmly have a place to either seek a nomination or seek public office.
Up next, up, down, and all around, we'll go beyond the poll numbers with an expert who uses the figures within national polls to predict seat distribution. Now, during election campaigns, beyond the daily tales of where the leaders are and what promises they're making, we're also bombarded by poll numbers. They show us where the race is going, whether there's any momentum for one party or one leader, and what kind of mood the electorate is in. But this week, a series of polls released paint a confusing picture of what's happening in the campaign. Now, a Canadian Press Harris Decima survey released Monday suggests Conservative support has dropped to 36% nationally, down 4 points from a week ago. The loss appears to have benefited the NDP, which gained 4 points to 19%. The Liberals, though, remain steady at 28%, with the Bloc and Greens well back. But an Angus Reid poll released after the weekend also has the Conservatives on top with 36% support, but it's more than 10 points ahead of the Liberals, which according to this poll are now tied with the NDP at 25%. The same thing happened in 2008 after the debates, but the New Democrats just couldn't hold on to the gain in support. But a new Nanos poll paints a very different picture. It shows the Conservatives with 40% support and a 10-point lead over the Liberals, but in this poll, the NDP sit at 17%. Of course, the leaders will tell you the most important poll is the one taken on Election Day, but what should we take from the polls and what do they mean? Well, political scientist from Wilfrid Laurier University has come up with a way to use the regional numbers from the national polling firms and project a seat breakdown from those numbers. The magic number parties are looking for is 155, which would give them a majority, and I sat down with Barry Kay to go over his latest findings after drilling down on the polls. Barry, thanks for your time today. Obviously, you're the man we come to when we want to know about what the polls are actually meaning and what they may reflect in terms of a seat distribution for this upcoming campaign. What are your numbers showing you so far?
Well, the numbers we've just produced this morning, based on a series of polls in the few days, many of which were actually before the debate, show that, in fact, the Conservatives are still just below a majority territory. We've got them at 151, the Liberals at 75, NDP 34, and 48 Bloc. But those numbers actually have moved back and forth a little bit, really, for the last 2 months. There really hasn't been a dramatic change in public opinion, either in this region or, for that matter, nationwide in the last couple of months.
So what does that tell you then about the campaign? Does it mean the campaign isn't having an effect and people aren't paying attention?
I think people aren't interested for the most part. There are 3/4 of the population are committed to one party or another, and those people are still probably passionately concerned, liberal, conservative, whatever. But for people that are normally would be switchers, that would be moving back and forth, they do not seem to be particularly interested, and we're more than halfway through the campaign now, and frankly, things have hardly budged at all for all the various shenanigans that the parties have tried to exploit and the various issues they put forward. People just don't seem to be particularly interested, certainly not interested among the people who might be the swing voters, the people that move from one party to another.
Do you take any stock in the fact that 4 million people watched the English debate this week, and that was like 20% more than in the past, that perhaps, even though the numbers aren't changing, the people are perhaps a little more engaged, but they're still along party lines, not changing their support? There
was a curiosity factor. They did get a good turnout. Fortunately, they just chose not to run against the hockey game, which was sort of critical to that. But, and I don't want to say things can't change in the last 2 weeks, but up until now, it seems to me the people that were watching were people that probably had largely formed their opinions already. and were not likely to be moved particularly by anything that happened in the debate. And quite frankly, there weren't any serious mistakes or blunders by anybody. We can speculate about which side you like or which side you don't like, but I don't think anybody truly won the debate, and nobody really made a mistake of consequence in the debate either. And as a result, yes, there were people paying attention, it seems, at least watching TV. But I'm not at all convinced that the debates are going to have a whole lot to do with the campaign. And frankly, almost nothing that's gone on in the last few weeks has really affected public opinion much.
You talk about the last few weeks. The next 2 weeks, though, of course, are the last 2 weeks of the campaign. In experience and what you've seen, does much change in the last 2 weeks of a campaign? I mean, obviously, a day in politics is a long time. It
can. We've had campaigns. I remember in the 04, in fact, things switched the last night or two. So I don't want to suggest it can't happen. We've had campaigns, 2000 as an example, where the lines were flat, the public opinion polls throughout the campaign. Yes, it could. And I think the Liberals and the opposition in general is probably trying to think whatever they can to throw banana peels under Harper. But Stephen Harper, as the incumbent government, it really is his campaign to lose. There's an adage that I frequently sort of cite in looking at this, that elections governments rather are defeated, not elected. This isn't really about Michael Ignatieff and the Liberals. It's about Stephen Harper. And if he runs a relatively mistake-free campaign, which seems to have been the case up till now, I'm not sure it's within the power of the opposition parties. The interesting phenomenon that might yet still occur is whether or not, because what is at question isn't so much who's likely to be the prime minister when this is over, but whether or not it's going to be a majority or minority conservative government. Mm-hmm. And we may see, it varies from riding to riding because it depends on the specifics, but we may see, in fact, New Democrats and Green Party members starting to defect because they are more concerned about the prospect of a conservative majority than they are about casting a symbolic vote for their party, particularly in a riding where it might not make much difference anyway. So that's really what you're looking out for then, I suppose, over the next little while. If there's going to be change in this part of the country, I think that's going to be it. Different parts of the country are different. In BC, in fact, it's the NDP that challenges the Conservatives in most ridings rather than the Liberals. But in this part of Ontario, and certainly separate from the downtown Toronto or Northern Ontario or Hamilton, where a lot of those are Liberal NDP contests, but in much of the rest of southwestern Ontario, in fact, it's really a matter of, is it going to be a Conservative majority or a minority? Mm-hmm. Barry, how long have you been doing this? How long have you been taking all of these polls, aggregating them, and then spreading out the numbers and trying to figure out that seat distribution? Gee, I guess it goes back some 30 years where I've been playing with it. It sort of got refined over the years, and I probably didn't go public with it until around 1990. And quite frankly, for many years, the only media source that ever covered it was the Kitchener Record, the local paper here. Mm-hmm. Again, when I started working with Global Television, it developed, it had a little bit more of a platform and people became aware of it. Now there's others doing similar kinds of things. It's a relatively straightforward kind of notion. In fact, what I do is I don't limit myself to any one company's polls. I try to make use of all the polls I can, mm-hmm. and then break the country down regionally. So in fact, I don't even use national numbers, I use the regional numbers. So I have a model for Ontario, a model for Quebec, a model for Atlantic Canada, the BC, and so forth, and apply the swing from the previous election to what the polls suggest is going on now. And again, that too can change. This election, it hasn't changed so very much, but some elections it does. And apply that swing to the ridings within that particular region, taking account of some other factors like incumbency, by-elections, whether there's a leadership candidate in place. There are a few other things that get entered into it as well. And over time, it's actually, and again, with the only way we can ever really test this, it's only as good as the polls I'm putting into it. Absolutely. So if the polls are off, it's going to be off too. But in fact, the one way we really can test this kind of model is to look at the actual election results themselves. Mm-hmm. So once an election is over, I look at what's called a post-diction, is predicting the past, yes. Predicting the future from the past. If you knew what the regional vote split was in the different regions of the country, based on the previous election of that's returns, what impact that would have. And in general, using that particular measure, it's been accurate to within about 4 seats per party per election. That goes back almost 50 years to the election of 1963. Whoa, so this is a fairly accurate predictor right now. By that particular standard. And indeed, many of the times, the pre-election polls have been quite reflective of what what election day would look like. The last couple of times Ontario's been off by a few points, so it hasn't been as good lately as it was back in the 80s and the 90s. But in fact, over time, I'm quite happy with it. And now there are other people that are using. There's sort of 100 ways you can tweak it. So there's little variations. But in general, I think most of the other people that are doing projections are using something similar with some perhaps slightly different assumptions built into it.
So it'll be interesting to see what develops then between now and May the 2nd, of course.
Oh, absolutely. Elections are fun. Again, I would be happy if we had elections sort of annually. If we can have baseball season once a year, I don't see why we can't have elections, but I appreciate that not everyone sort of sees it that way.
Barry, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Happy to talk to you.
Up next, Halton's issues. We've showed you the women vying for the seat. Now, hear what they have to say about what's important to their constituents. Welcome back. Earlier, we showed you the unique nature of the Halton riding. Now we want to show you what the candidates are saying about the riding and their chances of winning. We tagged along as candidates from each of the main parties went looking for votes.
Geographically, it's large, but it's not as large as places in Alberta where half the province are in one riding. If you ever have a question, give us a call.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Nice talking to you. Bye. Some places are more settled. Burlington's a very settled area of my riding. Oakville, we still have a little bit of people coming in and out, and Milton is average age, I think, is 34 years old, which is quite different from Burlington. But people care about the same things. They care about having a job, having enough money at the end of the day, looking after kids, looking after grandkids. So pretty easy to go from one area to another.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Connie.
Oh, hi. I'm a new volunteer.
Welcome. Thanks so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Oh.
Good. It's a huge riding. I've been to every part of the riding now, at least in pockets, and I've had resoundingly positive response to the Liberal platform, which is really about standing up for families.
What are the issues that people are talking about? I mean, I know the Liberal platform, but what are the issues you're actually hearing at the door?
In this riding, we have a mix of everything. We have urban and rural. We have young families. We have families who've been here for generations. And I think across the board, what people are talking about is public policy that's going to help them do what they need to do. Most people are talking about the day-to-day issues that they're dealing with, whether it's caring for their aging parents or making sure they have access to health care. These are issues people really feel passionately about.
So who's the hunter or the angler in the...
My husband.
Yeah? I just saw him come in. What I heard in Oakville and in Burlington too is, the economy is doing well. We have our jobs still. We're able to make sure our kids are doing okay, and we want to make sure that we continue to have that steady income and that steady prosperity. We do get concerns from seniors, absolutely, and we do get concerns on the other side about working families trying to make it work together. But it's pretty much all circled around the issue of the economy and jobs.
Truly, if we don't take into consideration our environment when we build, or whether it be a highway or some new buildings or some new houses, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're digging ourselves into a hole, and it's going to be hard to get out. And the window's closing, but it's not closed yet.
Halton is basically 4 different areas: North Oakville, North Burlington, the rural area, and the town of Milton. Each one's a little bit different. Town of Milton has a very local issue of wanting to make sure that their hospital grows as the community grows.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
I'm here representing Jack Layton. I wanted to know how you feel about how the election is running, and if there's anything that I can bring to his attention that you would like some answers to. Oakville's issues are different than Burlington's issues. Burlington's issues are different than the North issues. And so it makes it very, very difficult. And plus it's a large area.
It's parts of different towns. So yeah, so in that sense, there's I suppose there's probably different socioeconomic blends of people that are here, that are living here, but really, and having said that, they all do sort of seem to be in relatively the same socioeconomic strata.
It would appear that Jack Layton probably won't be Prime Minister on May the 2nd. So at that point, what do you then tell residents in Halton about why it's important to vote NDP then for this riding?
It's very important to vote your conscience, not vote because this person's going to win or that person's going to win, because without the New Democratic Party fighting in Parliament for the rights of just us, not banks, not the army, just us, then we've totally been forgotten.
How do you honestly rate your chances on May the 2nd?
Honestly, my chances personally, I don't know. That's honest.
How do you rate your chances in a riding like Halton?
Well, realistically, I know I'm not going to get voted in, but I'd love to.
It's nice to get an honest answer.
No, I'm happy. But like I said, I'm happy because at every single debate that we have, and in interviews like what you're doing right now, green questions are having an opportunity to be answered.
You're working full-time.
Yep.
You're campaigning full-time as well.
Right.
You're putting a lot of effort into this for what you're basically admitting is really a losing effort.
Well, it's not a losing effort. You know, just crossing the finish line is not necessarily what winning is all about. Winning is I feel like it's the right thing for me to do, to try to put forward the best effort that I can.
You're running against an incumbent MP who is also a cabinet minister, and stimulus spending has enabled her to bring and deliver quite a bit to the riding. How do you go up against that? How are you going to be tackling that on to try to make sure you win come May 2nd?
I'm not in this to have any personal attacks. I'm really calling this government to account. I think that the job here is to put before people what this government has done and what they haven't done. And this is the first government in history to be held in contempt of Parliament. That's a pretty serious thing. I mean, that contempt, to me, is contempt of democracy, contempt of Canadian people.
So you're more running against Stephen Harper, per se, and the Conservative record than Lisa Raitt in your mind?
I think that this government needs to be held accountable. It's my job to do that.
Do you feel a little bit more pressure being an incumbent this time around?
Interesting question. I don't know if I feel pressure, but, you know, I'm asking for my job back. I take it very seriously. I have a record this time that I'm proud to talk about on the doorstep. You came to see me during the March break.
Coming up, is he an elder statesman or a protest candidate trying to make a point? Gordon Scott doesn't pull any punches in his run at Parliament. Before we end this evening's show, we want to introduce you to Gordon Scott. The 90-year-old World War II vet is running to represent Peterborough in Ottawa.
I wouldn't say that I'm hoping to win. If I win, I'm prepared to act on that.
Scott's really a protest candidate, and what he's looking to do is give voters turned off by what they're seeing in Ottawa and what they feel they're getting representative-wise a place to park their vote until they see something they actually believe in and support. And he has a clear message for voters as well as a folksy charm that really just comes with age.
You better get a Twitter account and a Facebook account if you want to get the 50% that aren't voting.
Tweet, Twitter? How childish can you be? Excellent. And they're doing politics on Twitter. You know, instead of in the House of Commons, I want the people to vote for me who have decided that there is no alternative, where they can cast a ballot that will give the results that they want, that will help them to say no to Parliament.
Be interesting to see how many votes he gets. Well, that's all for tonight's show. Next week, we'll take a look at the overall campaign, what's changed, if anything, with the poll numbers, and what voters are thinking in the days leading up to the election. Thanks so much for watching. Now stay tuned for evening news at 11.